So I'm Andrew Yang. Most of you, raise your hand if you know a whole lot about me, because some of you definitely do. I can tell by what you're wearing. Some of you know a lot about me. Some of you know less, and it's great. I appreciate the people who are just here that want to find out more about one of the presidential candidates. I know that's something of an Iowa pastime that you just get to be like, oh, I'm not doing anything this Sunday night. I might as well go see the latest presidential candidate speak and see what they have going on. It's like the cheapest form of entertainment. Well, you all deserve it, really. I mean, I just got asked the other day about what I thought of the current caucus system and the New Hampshire primary. And I said to them, if you change the system, whatever you change it to, people would have no idea what to do. It's like, well, the people in Iowa know what to do. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't replace decades of political culture and experience. Like, you would something else, like Nebraska, they would have no idea what to do. It's like no one else would have any idea what to do. So I love the caucus system. I think it's genius. I think it's very wise. I think there's a reason why it stood the test of time. And one of the main reasons I love being here with you all in Iowa is that you genuinely control the future of the country. And it's something that some of you appreciate, some of you take very, very seriously, like you honor it. But I have to say, the rest of the country does not realize just how, just what they're missing. The rest of the country doesn't realize that that here in Iowa you can come see me speak and then actually think wow, if I like what that person had to say, we can actually take that message to the rest of the country very quickly. So for those of you who don't know much about me, you've probably gathered I am not a career politician. I'm wearing a math hat that stands for Make America Think Harder. And this is my rally cap. I wear it to rallies. You see with that picture. So that was in the National Mall in Washington, D.C. And I came to this work because of my past experience, where before this I started and ran an organization called Venture for America that created thousands of jobs around the country. And for this I was awarded an honorary ambassadorship of entrepreneurship by the Obama White House, or as I call it now, the Good White House. And so I was getting accolades and awards for creating jobs around the country, and then Donald Trump won the election in 2016. And what ensued in my mind was a lot of confusion. Donald Trump won, and the question I've been asking people here in Iowa is, why did Donald Trump win your state by almost 10 points? Why did he win Missouri, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin? Why did he win all of these states? And so the confusion that ensued afterwards in terms of why Donald Trump's our president today, if you turned on cable news, what are the explanations that you might have received? Why would you think that he was our president based upon the commentary? Russia. Hillary Clinton, Putin, cheating, the FBI, Facebook, racism, immigration, some combination of these things. Sexism. Obviously there were many complicating factors, but my fundamental message is that all of that is missing the point. And the point is this: I looked at the numbers. The reason why Donald Trump is our president today is that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, and 40,000 right here in Iowa. And if you dig into the numbers in each area, you see that the more you automate away jobs in that community, the more that community turns red. That is why Iowa went to Donald Trump by almost 10 points. And unfortunately, what happened to the manufacturing jobs is now going to happen to retail jobs. How many of you have noticed stores closing around where you live? And why? Look around. I mean, everyone had their hand up. And why are those stores closing? Amazon, that's right. Amazon is soaking up $20 billion in commerce every year. It's pushing 30% of your malls and Main Street stores to close. What is the most common job here in Iowa and around the United States? Working in retail. The average retail worker is a 39-year-old woman who makes between $10 and $11 an hour. So if those stores and malls close, what is the next move going to be for those retail workers? No idea. Someone said Walmart, but Walmart's not exactly hiring either if these retail districts are contracting. You all have lost 12,000 retail jobs in the last number of months, and you have 178,000 to go. So if you think about what that's going to mean here in Iowa, someone yelled out truck driving, and truck driving is the most common job in 29 states. There are 3.5 million truck drivers. I was just at Iowa 80, the biggest truck stop in the country. How many of you have been to Iowa 80? Now, all of you, right? I can see why, because as soon as you're driving by, you're like, ooh, Iowa 80, let's stop there and get some food. The buffet is delicious. Yeah, so I did the same thing. I've been there like half a dozen times. And what it proudly says 5,000 people stop here every day. But my friends in California are working on trucks that can drive themselves. They say that we are 5 to 10 years away from automated truck drivers. Now, why are my friends in Silicon Valley so interested in automating away truck drivers? The most American of reasons, money. The amount of savings from automating truck driving are estimated to be $168 billion per year. And that's not just in labor savings, that's fuel efficiency, because right now the human-driven trucks have to stop after 14 hours, and then the driver has to get out and go to sleep. Robot truck never needs to stop. Robot truck, they can form convoys that lower wind resistance and improve fuel efficiency. So you could even argue it's good for the earth. You could also argue that you're going to save lives because accidents with human truck drivers kill about 4,000 Americans a year. So that's the set of forces that are moving towards self-driving trucks. And my friends in Silicon Valley tell me we're 98% of the way there. Now, the last 2% is very stubborn. The trucks are very bad with something called snow. But again, you have $168 billion like trying to solve this problem. Like they're confident they can get there. And on the other side of the equation, you have 3.5 million truck drivers, including tens of thousands here in Iowa. And the average truck driver is a 49-year-old man making about $46,000 a year. It's a very hard job. What is the next move going to be for that truck driver when the trucks start driving themselves? The bread lines, suicide. I mean, it's dark but true. I studied economics in college. How many of you all studied economics? Some people here for sure. So my economics textbook said that if you lost 4 million manufacturing jobs, those workers would get retrained, reskilled, find new jobs, the economy would grow. Anyone who had your hand up to study economics, you remember that? That's what it says, right? So then what actually happened to the 4 million manufacturing workers here in Iowa and Michigan, Ohio, when they lost their jobs? About half of them left the workforce and never worked again. And then of that group, about half filed for disability. And then we saw surges in drug overdoses and suicides to the point where now our life expectancy as a country has declined for the last 3 years. Do you know the last time America's life expectancy declined 3 years in a row? The Spanish flu of 1918. We are back in Spanish flu territory right now. It is unusual for American or any developed country's life expectancy to decline for 1 year. That's unusual. Declining 3 years in a row should be a national emergency. Now, none of this was in my economics textbook. My economics textbook painted a very rosy picture. So I'm going to suggest that what happened to the manufacturing workers is what's going to happen to the truck drivers, is what's going to happen to the call center workers. There are thousands of call center workers here in Iowa, and we're working on software that can do that job. Now, I know when you call customer service right now, you probably do what I do, which is you get a bot or a recording, and then you hit the 0 button, you're like human, 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 like as fast as you can, right? Because the bot's super irritating. You're like human, 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 then you eventually get a human, you're like, oh, thank goodness. And then you do, right? How many of you agree? Like, raise your hand if that's your experience. That's everyone, right? All right, so now, in 3 years, we're not going to be able to tell the difference between the human and the bot. The AI is going to pick up the phone and be like this, hey, Andrew, how's it going? And then they're going to be like, it's going well. Can you do this for me? And I'll be like, sure. I'm happy to do that for you. And then it's going to go smoothly, and then I'll be like, oh, that was delightful. There are 2.5 million call center workers in the United States who make on average $14 an hour. What do you think the time frame is on them losing their jobs? 2 years, 1 year. For anyone who thinks this is far out, you can Google an AI demo from Google where they had AI software make appointments on behalf of the user. Like this software is like, not like years away. This software is like weeks or months away. We are in the midst of the greatest economic and technological transformation in the history of the country. Experts are calling it the fourth industrial revolution. And our politicians are completely absent from talking about this. The reason why Donald Trump is our president is because of these changes. He is not the cause, he is a symptom. He is the manifestation. So this is what I was grappling with in 2016 he wins. I was like, wow, America is so desperate, we just elected a narcissist reality TV star as our president. Like, that was a shock to me. And then I dug into the numbers, I found, okay, I get it. We're automating away millions of jobs. Americans are being driven into economic distress, as JD said like 80% paycheck to paycheck, and we're beginning to tear ourselves apart. So then I went to Washington, D.C., and asked the people there, what are we going to do about it? And what do you think they all said to me? Number one, literally they said to me, we cannot talk about this. Number two was, we should study this. And number three was, we must educate and retrain Americans for the jobs of the future. And that last one sounds pretty responsible. But then I said, look, I dug into the numbers. Do you all want to guess how effective government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers? 0 to 15%. It's a non-solution. And so then when I said to the policymakers in DC, we're terrible at retraining, I have the numbers, you know what they said to me then? I guess we'll get better at it. So I left DC with this feeling of doom or foreboding. I was like, wow, no one's going to do anything about this. And someone in DC did me this favor. He actually said those words to me. He said, Andrew, no one in DC is going to do anything about this, because this is not a town of leaders, this is a town of followers. And the only way that we are going to do anything about it is if you create a wave in other parts of the country and bring it crashing down on our heads. And that is why I'm with you tonight, people of Iowa. Will you help me create that wave? Because that is where we are. We're at a point where our country is tearing itself apart, and who are we scapegoating? We're scapegoating immigrants. Immigrants have nothing to do with this. If you go to a factory today, it's not immigrants, it's giant robot arms and claws. And if you go to an Amazon fulfillment center, it's the same thing. How much did Amazon pay in federal taxes last year? Zero. So think about it. You have this giant vacuum sucking up $20 billion a year in commerce out of your communities here in Iowa. You're looking around seeing stores close, and you're going to get back zero. When they automate your call center jobs, zero. When they automate the truck driving jobs, zero. Like, this is going to be ground zero for the set of economic changes. And it must be ground zero for a different vision of the economy that will actually work for us, the owners and citizens of this country. So if you're here tonight, you've probably heard something like this about me. There's an Asian man running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. Yeah, that's right, Yang Gang. And those things are all true. And so, first, when you hear this $1,000 a month thing, you're like, that sounds literally too good to be true. It sounds like a gimmick. It sounds fantastic. But then you dig into our country's history. It turns out this idea has been with us since our founding. Thomas Paine was for it. The founding of the country called it the citizen's dividend. Decades later, Martin Luther King championed it in 1967, called it the guaranteed minimum income, and it was his signal cause in his book, Chaos or Community, in 1967, and he was walking around the country speaking about this very thing, fighting for it, until he was assassinated the following year, in 1968. Milton Friedman and 1,000 economists signed a study saying this would be tremendous for America, and it was so mainstream that it passed the US House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon, came this close to being law. It's called the Family Assistance Plan. Would have guaranteed minimum income about $30,000 a year in present dollars for a family of four. Came this close. And then 11 years later, one state actually passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? And how do they fund it? And what is the oil of the 21st century? Technology, that's right. Some people say marijuana, which I'm for legalizing, but it is technology. It's big data, it's AI, it's software, it's robots, it's all of the things that we're coming up with that, frankly, you are going to see very little of the benefits from. Because Amazon paying zero in taxes is not unusual. They pay zero taxes all the time. Their lifetime tax rate is 3%. So like, when the accountants come back to Jeff and be like, hey, Jeff, great news, another year of zero taxes, and then he high-fives them and then sends them home in trucks full of money. And then they go home and they dump all the money in their vault, and then they take a bath in it like Scrooge McDuck in those old cartoons. And they do this every year. Every year. Like the accountants are like, yes, another 0 year, we're gonna get another truckload of money. And I'm gonna suggest to you all that that's not their fault. They're just doing their job. That is our fault. If we designed a system that's so dumb that $1 trillion tech company can pay zero in federal taxes, then we should change that system. Am I right? So this $1,000 a month plan has been with us since the beginning of the country, and the time is now. We can make this happen. We have, trust me, we have ample resources. Our economy's up to $20 trillion, up $5 trillion in the last 12 years, and $1,000 a month. Now, after I'm president, thanks to you all, thank you, Iowa, and then the dividends start coming back your way. So I just want to imagine, just look around you for a moment. Imagine everyone in this room getting $1,000 a month more than you are right now. And then say, like, ask yourself, what would you do with that money? Where would that money go? Which will be legal, so you will be able to buy it, that's true. And any other suggestions, thoughts as to? Knowledge, solar panels, college. Was it knowledge or college? Same thing, right? You would spend it, businesses, you would spend it on things that you're currently spending it on now, but a lot of it would stay right here in Iowa, in Des Moines, am I right? A little bit of it would float up to the cloud. You'd probably buy an extra toaster on Amazon. But most of it would stay right here and go to tutoring for your kids and car repairs you've been putting off and the occasional night out and trips to the hardware store. And then all those businesses then would have to build up and hire for increased demand. We would increase the size of your consumer economy by about 15% and create 40,000 new jobs right here in Iowa. This is the trickle-up economy, from people and families and communities up. And this is the vision that we need to have in order to move forward in the 21st century. Now, it's one reason I'm so proud to be here with J.D. Scholten. The EITC is great. The EITC is tremendous. But like J.D. said, 25 to 30% of Americans nationwide actually don't get the EITC that they're entitled to. And for many Americans, there's like a real timing of payments issue, because even if I get the EITC, I'm not getting the cash when I actually needed it 6 months ago. You know, there's like this tenuous process, and most Americans don't have the cash flow to be able to balance that timing. So it's going to be much more effective if we just make it a right of citizenship for you all to get $1,000 a month. And you know, I love the ITC, but the freedom dividend is going to be much more immediate and powerful, and then everyone's going to be able to rely on it. And we've seen what happened in Alaska, where in Alaska it was passed by a Republican governor. And now everyone in Alaska loves it. It's like the favorite thing about their government. They're getting like $1,000 to $2,000 a year from Alaska in a very deep red state. And it's so popular that a majority of Alaskans said they would accept higher taxes if it was going to fund their dividend. They love it so much. You guys think of the last thing the government did that you were that excited about? This is going to be like the signal accomplishment of our era. Like the rest of, we're going to look up and be like, wow, the feds did something I love for once. You know, the check's coming our way. So this is the trickle-up economy from our people and our families and communities up. We need to go further. We need to get health care off the backs of American families and businesses. I'm for Medicare for all. It is perverse in this country that in the richest and most advanced economy in the history of the world, when you get sick or injured, you are more stressed out about navigating our crazy system and paying your bills than you are getting well or getting healthy. And when people talk about where are we going to get the money, again, there's a lot of confusion around this. We're spending 18% of our GDP on our healthcare right now. We're spending twice as much as other countries to worse effects. We have the money, again. Like, if there's one thing you remember from this night tonight, just know that we have the money. And as someone who's run businesses too, I mean, it's moral and it's going to make us healthier and stronger, but it's also going to free us up. Because right now, it's harder for businesses to hire because of our healthcare system. When they do hire, they want to turn you into a temp or contract or a gig worker and not make you a full-time employee. It's harder to switch jobs for you all. It's harder to start a business. How many of you have thought about starting a business at some point in the last number of years, and then you had to think to yourself, wait a minute, what am I going to do about healthcare? Right? That's like a real problem. It's actually keeping us stuck in place. So by getting healthcare off our backs, we're actually going to make our economy and society much more dynamic. And for the third thing, how many of you woke up this morning excited about GDP? You were like, I'm going to make a really big contribution today. I can feel it, even though it's a Sunday. And I'd like to talk about my wife, who's at home with our 2 boys right now, one of whom is autistic. What is her work calculated at in GDP? 0. What is the market value of her work at? No, the market value is her work at 0 too. And we know that's messed up and the opposite of what the truth is. We know that her work is as important and valuable and challenging as any other work. So right now, people are crowing about GDP while our people are dying of drugs and suicides. And I said something out saying, like, instead of celebrating GDP, we should be celebrating our children being healthier or people getting off of addiction. So GDP is something we made up almost 100 years ago, and now it's driving us off a cliff. Because robot trucks are going to be great for GDP, but they're going to be terrible for us. So if you don't have the right measurements, you will never make progress. So what are the measurements we should be using for our economy? It's how our kids are doing, our mental health and freedom from substance abuse, our physical health and life expectancy, how clean our air and water are. Believe it or not, we can actually make those the new GDP. And while that sounds really difficult, it's actually really easy, because after you make me president, I'm just going to go walking down the street to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and say, hey, GDP is really old, very out of date. We're going to update it to this new set of measurements, and then I'm going to report on those measurements to you all every year at the State of the Union. I'm going to be the first president to use PowerPoint, my State of the Union. It's going to show you what it is. Yeah, you'll get some real information out of it. And I'll say, look, we're going to try and get this down by 50% over the next couple of years, instead of these bizarre theater performances we're currently subject to. Anyone else find these things unwatchable now? Yeah, you turn it on, you're like, what the heck is going on? So those are the 3 big moves: the freedom dividend, Medicare for all, and the new version of GDP that I call the American scorecard. And when I talk about my wife, the Democratic Party talks about empowering women all the time. But we all know that there are thousands of women here in Iowa and millions of women around the country that are in exploitative or abusive jobs or relationships that would be improved by $1,000 a month. So the Democratic Party can either talk about empowering women or do something about it, and I say we do something about it. So this is the plan to help push us through what is going to be a very, very difficult, challenging time in our nation's history. And Donald Trump is our president today, in part because he got the problems right. If you remember this in 2016, he was like, oh, things are rough, things are going very badly. And what was the Democratic response at the time? Everything's fine. And then we lost. So what we have to do is we have to dig in and try and solve the problems that got Donald Trump elected in 2016. He got the problems right, but then the solutions were the opposite of what we need. What were his solutions? We need to build a wall. We need to turn the clock back. We need to magically restore the jobs. And I'm saying we have to do the opposite of all of those things. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate both our economy and society. And I am the man to beat Donald Trump in 2020 because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Math, that's right. Wow, all these friendly penguins dressed up in the front. I have a feeling I'm going to be asked about climate change, which I love. I mean, I don't love climate change. I'd have to be like total, like messed in the head to love climate change. So I'm going to go a little bit inside baseball. Oh, don't worry, the penguins will speak. I genuinely like penguins. I'm pro-penguin, it's true. It's humanity first and then penguin second. But it's close. It's close. So I want to bring you guys behind the curtain a little bit and talk about this campaign. So right now there's like one criteria that most Democrats have front and center, which is how are we going to beat Donald Trump? Am I right? If you survey Democrats, the first thing they think is like, how are we going to beat Donald Trump? And so we're in this sort of circular place where we're like, who are we going to have to beat Donald Trump? Who's going to be the most electable? Now, if you do any research into my campaign, what you find out is that I'm drawing support from Democrats and progressives, yes. But I'm also drawing support from independents. Anyone? Always some here. Libertarians. People who voted for Donald Trump. Sometimes they're a little shy, but they're out there. So I'm drawing support from all over the political spectrum. And if you look at the coverage about me, you actually see that people are like, why are these Trump voters turning to Andrew Yang? I am the candidate that's best situated to build a broad coalition to beat Donald Trump in 2020, because I'm actually already peeling off many people who supported him 4 years ago. Now, many of you haven't heard of me, but I'm one of the Democrats who's qualified for the Democratic primary debates in June and July. And we accomplished that together, thank you all, by getting over 100,000 individual donations with an average of only $19. So my fans are even cheaper than Bernie's. If you donate $20, you're immediately an above average member of the Yang Gang. It's a very inexpensive gang to join. So people have looked up at the numbers and said, wait, Andrew Yang is polling at 3% nationwide. He's raised millions of dollars from over 100,000 donors around the country, heading to 200,000. And his name recognition is lower than any other candidates. And so Nate Silver, who's a very smart guy, runs a blog called 538. He looked at those three numbers and he said, we cannot discount the possibility that Andrew Yang is just going to grow and grow and grow and win the whole thing. Because the more people find out about this campaign, the more like, wait, that actually describes the reality I live in, and those are solutions that would improve our lives. And because of this, we are very quickly growing, and we're going to contend the whole way. It's a lot of fun. You know, it's like, this has been an incredible several months for the campaign. The campaign team, like seeing this, actually, like look around here. I mean, we've got like hundreds of people here, and what I want to wrap on is, again, what a special place Iowa is because of the power you all hold in your hands. Now, there are many people around the country who are in despair about our future. They look up and they see these giant pipes clogged full of money, like hundreds of millions of dollars just like wedged in there. And they look up and they say, my vote does not matter. And they are largely correct. Their votes do not matter. There's nothing they can do to change this system. If there are going to be changes in the system, if we're going to present a new economic vision to the rest of the country, it has to come from the Democrats and the people of Iowa. This is the responsibility and the privilege you all have. I did the math. Do you know how many Californians each of you is worth? Between 800 and 1,000 Californians. So how many people we have in this room? I'm going to call it like 250. You look around this room, I don't see 250 people. I see 250,000 Californians. If the Democrats of Iowa decide to embrace a different economic vision, it can catch hold like wildfire and sweep the country. That's a beautiful thing about being here. That's why I'm so invigorated anytime I'm here, because each of you is worth your weight in gold. You may not feel it all the time because you're here and you see this as relatively normal. It is not normal. If you go to another state line, you like lose your powers. That's true. You lose your residency, it's like, oh, you don't matter anymore. I was at a rally the other day and someone told me they'd driven 12 hours from Michigan to come to my rally. And my first response was, you don't matter. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I love that guy. That's great. It made me warm up. But you all have this historic power and responsibility. That if you don't know it, you should know it, and you should feel it. And you all have this opportunity to move our country in a different direction very, very quickly. If you do not take this opportunity, it will not happen, and this opportunity will be lost. And we will be in for another 4 years of the disintegration of your way of life in your communities, of the soaking up of value, of your kids looking around and saying, is there an opportunity for me that will keep me here in this community or in this state? This is the future that is ahead unless we change course and start valuing ourselves intrinsically as the owners and shareholders of this great country instead of economic inputs into this giant capital machine. That is the choice. And I know that you will help us take this vision to the rest of the country in 2020 and change the course of history with us. Thank you all very much, Iowa. Thank you, Yang Gang. Let's make America think. Let's solve the real problems. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Y'all are beautiful. I'm going to come down and say hello. Thank you. I'm going to run down these stairs. Hello. Hey. It's my favorite reporter from the Des Moines Register. Hey, all. I think we got some questions. Thank you all. I just wanted to say hello.
What about a jobs program like the WPC? And tell them how you're going to pay for this.
Sure. Oh, yeah, sure thing. I'll just hop onto the mic. I'll answer it from down here. Go on stage. They need a camera. Oh, it's me, JD. All right. Come on, JD. Let's go have some fun. JD, where are you at? Are we sharing this bad boy?
Yeah. Well, can I do one quick question? So in Sioux City, where I live, there is my local barista. Yeah, Sioux City, represent. There is my local barista is a member of the Yang Gang. Nice. And he talks you up all the time, and I want to know, what is your version, and what do you think, like what, talk to us about the Yang Gang and what it's all about.
Rule number one is you don't talk about Yang Gang. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Actually, rule number one is you always talk about Yang Gang, like your barista. So Yang Gang is just this name that bubbled up for people who support the campaign. And it's just, like as a journalist said, it's just fun to say. It's so fun to say that people have even written songs about it. They're just like the Yang Gang anthem. But it bubbled up. Yeah, there's several songs, actually. You can Google that. Well, what the Yang Gang means to me is just people that are embracing a vision of an economy that puts people first and that starts serving our goals and values instead of us all, frankly, like trying to turn ourselves into something that's useful to the marketplace. And so to me, the Yang Gang is just people who believe in humanity first.
Should I ask a question? There we go.
I'd like to hear how you're going to pay for it. I know when you're a great
Well, number one was how do you pay for it? And then number two was what do you think about jobs programs like they had in the Depression with the WPP and the Civilian Conservation Corps, I think this is the CCC. So first, in terms of how you pay for it, I was talking about how Amazon paid zero in taxes, Netflix also paid zero in taxes, and so the big winners from artificial intelligence and the new economy are going to be this set of really big tech companies. And so the key is to try and get some of the money back from them and give it to you all. And then you'll spend it, and then you'll make the economy stronger. So if you look at what other countries have already done, every other advanced economy aside from ours already has a value-added tax, which would then give the American public a tiny slice of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad. And because our economy is up to 20 trillion plus, a value-added tax at even half the European level generates over 800 billion in new revenue. Now, this is the magic. If I give the money out to you all, the owners of this country, you spend it, and then your neighborhood economy grows, and then we get more tax revenue back. The trickle-up economy would actually work, unlike the trickle-down economy, which was total garbage and nonsense. They kind of knew that. It's even an insulting name. Think about it, the trickle-down economy. Anyway, so you get 800 billion from the value-added tax. You get about 400 billion in new tax revenue from economic growth, and then you save hundreds of billions on incarceration, homelessness services, emergency room health care, and other things that we spend hundreds of billions on now, over $1 trillion in the aggregate. And then here's the magic. If we put this money into our hands, what happens is our kids get stronger, they get better nutrition, graduation rates go up, health improves, mental health improves, relationships improve, domestic violence goes down, hospital visits go down. And there was one study that showed that if you were just to alleviate poverty in this country, we would increase GDP by 700 billion just on the basis of having stronger and healthier and more mentally healthy and productive people. So that's the magic of the trickle-up economies. The money doesn't disappear. It's investing in us. It's not left, it's not right, it's forward. And so that's like this is going to be much less expensive. We're going to get a lot of the money back. And I used to run businesses, and when you have a good business, you all the time talk about investing in your people. You say, if I invest in my people, then my organization will get stronger and do better. In the public space, we do the opposite. We're like, do not invest in those people at all if you can help it. And then we just end up paying at the back end when they wind up incarcerated or in our emergency room or in our services. When I was in New Hampshire, I'm very politician-y. When I was in New Hampshire a couple months ago, it was a corrections officer who said we should pay people to stay out of jail because we pay so much when they're in jail. So we have to start treating ourselves the way that good companies treat their people. We need to invest in ourselves, invest in our people.
Yes, my name is Mr. Linga. My co-workers, they are all strong Republicans. But when they saw you and me, I've always been a Democrat. But when they saw you on Ben Shapiro's show, Mr. Tucker Carlson's show, they want to convert to Democrats. I attended Mrs. Elizabeth Warren's rally, and after the rally, we always make a line to get personal pictures. But I noticed when you are in Washington, D.C., it was all about selfies. So can we, the people here, can we, after this event, make a line and get personal pictures?
I'll go with a second first. I will wait here until every single person here has a selfie who wants one. I'm not going anywhere. Now, that would not be the case if I was in a place like Michigan. I'm kidding. To the first point, I think that Democrats are doing ourselves a huge disservice by declaring certain venues off limits. I mean, how can you win an election if you're not showing up on places like Fox, which, like it or not, that's where millions of Americans get their news. Like, I mean, you know, it's like it or not, again, I mean, we have to win a national election. And so, like, the fact that the DNC said that Fox couldn't host a debate, to me was very counterproductive. What's that? Wow. It's my fans. No. So the fact that I would go on Fox News, to me, it's just introducing myself to Americans. And if we can get more people like your friends to convert to Democrats, then that is how we win.
Hi, Andrew. I'm a huge fan. I drove up here from Kansas City. I'm not an Iowan, so I'm one of those votes that don't count.
I'm kidding. No, thank you for doing that. Thank you.
So Iowa, please make my vote count one day. So I have a question for you. I'm from the tech industry in particular, and I actually drove up here with a friend who's a huge Elizabeth Warren fan, as am I. And I think the biggest understanding from a Democratic stance is how do we pick one? Because we like so many. And so I'm curious from your perspective, knowing that the majority of that money from a universal income is going to come from the added value tax along with a few other ones, Elizabeth Warren's sort of tactic in terms of handling the economy and the tech industry is to go in and implement some pretty strong antitrust laws, which is awesome. But I'm curious how your plan differs. They both come out with a similar outcome, but I'm just curious how your plan differs from that, knowing that me personally is a choice between you and Elizabeth. So if we're trying to decide between those two things, how does your plan kind of differ in terms of how you handle the technology?
Thank you. Such a specific question, which I love. First, let me say that I applaud your taste in candidates because I like Elizabeth Warren a great deal. So her approach towards tech in particular, like I felt like it was a little bit of like a set of 20th century approaches to 21st century problems. Because the antitrust laws are very poorly designed for this era, and so it does make sense to try and come up with new tests and measures. But in some of the cases, breaking up the tech companies wouldn't solve the problem. So I'll give you an example. Facebook and Instagram are very, very popular, and they're among the apps that are causing depression in teenage girls around the country by the data, because teenage girls have these smartphones, teenage boys too, but it's worse for girls. And so if that is a problem you're concerned about, breaking up the corporate ownership of Facebook and Instagram does not actually solve that problem. It's also the case that if you were to break up Amazon into 4 mini Amazons, which is not what she's recommending, that would not magically revive the Main Street economy of various towns. Like, you have to try and look at what the problems you're trying to solve are and go in case by case instead of doing something that, in my opinion, it feels satisfying, but in some cases, it might not be the right solution. One example I use is that none of us wants to use the 4th best navigation app. You know what I mean? Like in the 20th century, you were like, ooh, you should have competition. But in the 21st century economy, there's actually real gains to having one player that has all of the data so that you have like one navigation app you actually trust. You know, like it's a reason why Google has won and we all stopped using Yahoo and Bing and Ask Jeeves and the rest of it. Like, there are actually some benefits to it. And so you don't want to just show up and say, you know what we have to do? We have to turn this into like competition again. Because then you'll probably end up like just in this weird like circular pattern. Because then, given the advantages of data, like there's going to end up being like one winner that consolidates. So what we have to do is we have to look at it and say, look, what are the problems here we're trying to solve? And in some cases, it may include like having these businesses divest parts of themselves, 100%. And I agree with Elizabeth Warren that if you're Amazon, you can't be promoting your Amazon house brand over other companies' goods and then just continuously advantaging yourself and disadvantaging them. Like, I agree. And I think Elizabeth Warren's overall values and spirit and vision are the right ones. Like, I'm on board with like where she's trying to lead the country. I just, on that particular set of policies, I felt like she went a little bit like It was both over-inclusive and under-inclusive, depending upon the nature of the problems you're trying to address. So if a penguin wants to grab the mic from Connor, I'm sure that the penguins can speak, because again, I'm pro-penguin around here. Anyone who gets friends together and then dresses up and shows that level of commitment deserves the microphone. Am I right?
Thank you, Mr. Yank. And we just flew in from the South Pole, and boy, are our arms tired. I'm Sid Barfoot. I'm with Bold, Iowa. So in the past, when asked about climate change, you've said that people with financial struggles have the attitude that the penguins can wait in line. Well, full disclosure, I'm not a penguin. I'm actually a person with financial struggles, dressed as a penguin. Now, an extra $1,000 a month would be great. But in the meantime, we just found out last week that the second largest emperor penguin colony collapsed due to ice melt. And last year, 150,000 people were displaced by the deadliest wildfire in California's history. And just this year, thousands of people were displaced right here in the Midwest due to catastrophic flooding. So we've done the math, and neither people nor penguins have the time to wait in line while the next president spends political capital on something as ambitious as a universal basic income. So our question to you, Mr. Yank, is will you adjust your campaign and make avoiding climate catastrophe a priority, and so that both people and penguins can win?
Thank you for that. And 100% yes. Climate change is an existential threat to our way of life, humans and penguins alike. And to the extent I ever suggested that I was not fully committed, then I conveyed the wrong message. Because to me, climate change, I'm a parent, and I used to think we were shafting our grandkids. Now I think we're shafting ourselves and our kids. The last 4 years have been the 4 warmest years in recorded history. You don't need to be a genius or scientist to say, climate change is picking up. And you saw the floods here in Iowa and the Midwest. You see the forest fires and the changes around the world. So to the extent that I've said anything about the fact that in a society where 78% of people are having trouble paying their bills and it's hard to galvanize energy around climate change, I still stand by that. If you go to someone and say, we need to address climate change, they can't pay their bills, then they might look up at you and say the penguins can wait in line, I can't pay my bills. And so what we have to do is we have to get the economic boot off of people's throats. And then they're gonna hopefully realize that we need to address climate change. And this is the big thing, is that I've lived this in my career, and I really want you all to live this too. We can control our capital flows much more easily than we control just about anything else. If I'm elected president thanks to you all, this is not a far out policy at all. So bear with me. So I become president in 2021, and then the entire reaction is going to be the anonymous Asian man who wants to give everyone money just became president. How did that happen? And then all the Democrats and progressives will be super psyched because they'll be like, oh, let's work with a new Democratic president who beat Donald Trump and get money to children and families. And then Republicans and conservatives are going to look up and say, wait a minute, I kind of like this because this is money that's going to go to rural areas and red states on the interior. And we do not need 80% of Congress to pass the dividend. We just need 51%. So let's say we get the dividend across the finish line, and then President Yang is going to be like, all right, now climate change. And then we're going to be able to accelerate progress towards climate change because those people that earlier could not focus on anything but paying their bills now have their heads up. And then when you say climate change is an existential threat, they'll look at their children and say, yes, it is. So this is just my choice of tactics, but we are 100% aligned on where we need to go. I'm for a carbon fee and dividend. I'm for rejoining the Paris Accords. I'm for clean air and water as actual measurements of the economy. So my description of the people that have this boot on their throats, that's not saying like, I think the penguins can wait. Like what I was saying is like, look, we have to be real. If Americans can't pay their bills, then like that's job number one for them and their families and their kids. But then we can move towards climate change as fast as possible. The brutal truth, though, is that America only accounts for 15% of global emissions. So even if we go whole hog and move towards renewables as fast as possible, we're probably only going to slow the rate of climate change incrementally, even if we try and lead the world in the same direction. Unfortunately, the stuff that's making you very like depressed and like angry about the future of the global climate, it's happening. Like, you know, and even if we were to adopt very intelligent policies and get our share of global emissions down, the fact is a lot of the world is at a different point in their development cycle, and they're just going to keep on burning the cheapest forms of energy possible. So we should invest in trying to mitigate the worst effects of climate change, because it is probably coming our way regardless of what sort of policies we adopt. I just want to thank you all, though, for your energy and commitment and passion. Like, it's infectious, and you should know I am with you. Like, I'm not running around as a climate change candidate, but I am running around as a science candidate, and if you believe in science, you know climate change is a major, major threat.
Hi, glad to have you back in Iowa this week. Thinking about housing affordability, rising housing prices are hurting the pocketbooks of Americans across this country, notably in San Francisco and New York, but also in our state. We have a great shortage of housing that's affordable, especially for people who make about $25,000 or less a year. I know that you have some policies out on your website regarding zoning, so would just like to learn a little bit more about your proposals for making housing more affordable in our state and across the country.
Thanks. It's a phenomenal question. It's something that's near and dear. So there are three things that are making Americans miserable right now, writ large, aside from climate change. It's housing, education, and healthcare. Because all three of those things have risen in cost at a much higher rate than our wages. Our wages have essentially been stagnant. Education's gotten 2.5 times more expensive. Healthcare has gotten a similar level. Housing, not to the same extreme, but it's problematic. And the economic incentives around housing make it so that developers do not want to develop affordable housing. They want to try and gentrify things and make like the swankiest stuff that they can actually resell or rent, because that's where the money is. And so we have to provide real incentives to make affordable housing more available. But I would suggest that putting $1,000 a month into everyone's hands is a tremendous first step, because all of a sudden, then the rent payments that are dragging people down now would be less burdensome, and you'd also make it so that that income is portable. So you can go with it anywhere, you can pool it. So if the 6 penguins were to get together, you're all over 18, yes you are. So there'd be $6,000 a month, and among the 6 of them, they can afford a very nice habitat. So the $1,000 a month would go much further here in Iowa than it would in other parts of the country. And I've gotten complaints in other high-cost areas, like, why $1,000 a month for everyone? Like, our cost of living is so much higher here than it is in other places. And I'm just like, look, $1,000 a month, it's fair, everyone understands it. Like, if you want, you could move someplace less expensive. Just because you live in a high-cost area, there are other reasons why you're doing that. You know, it's like it's not up to me to try and make it. The other thing is it's totally impractical to somehow tie it to where you live, because there'd be a lot of games playing going on. So $1,000 a month is a much more powerful way for Iowans to be able to afford housing than it might be in other parts of the country.
Hi, my name is Michael. Me and my family came here from Morrison, and I wanted to ask, do you have any plans on improving school lunches?
That's a great question. So one of the things, it's Michael, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I've heard in rural communities around the country is that if your population shrinks, then a smaller number of households have to pay to afford the school. And so then the school budget goes down, and then I presume the lunches probably get a little bit less tasty too. And so what we have to do is we have to put money into the hands of the people, the homeowners in those communities, and then make it so that the tax base is strengthened, so that if you're in school there, then they're not cutting corners on things like your tater tots.
Michael, I want to talk to you about the 4th District a little bit. So we're the second most agriculture producing district in America, and yet we only have 2 farm-to-table restaurants in the entire district. And so we grow all these things and we export them. And what we need to do, in getting back to the monopoly question, which is different in technology than it is in agriculture. In agriculture, we absolutely have to enforce our antitrust. And what we need to do is like what the beer industry, and you're a little young for that, but that's all right. So when I was your age, there was Bud, there was Miller, and there was Coors. And when we changed the policies, and now there's craft brews all over the state of Iowa and all over the United States. We need to do the same thing with agriculture, and then we can partner our pork producers with the local school, and our local farmers with the local schools, and that's a solution to your problem.
Yes, JD. JD, oh, farm-to-table school lunches, I love it. That is what we need. That's vastly superior to anything I ate growing up. Yeah, come on.
Oh, thank you. It's my honor to ask you questions, Ms. Yang. And I am Chinese students study in the Drake University, and I am curious about how do you think of the trade war between China and the U.S., and what would you do if you become the president? Thank you.
So I've talked to many farmers here in Iowa who feel stabbed in the back by the trade war. In many cases, they supported Donald Trump, and then they said, I can't believe now these tariffs are making it much harder for me to sell my goods and maintain relationships abroad. There are real problems and imbalances in the U.S.-China trade relationship, particularly their theft of intellectual property. But the trade war, to me, was the wrong approach, because the trade war ended up causing problems on both sides of the border. It caused the zero-sum game where really neither American farmers or businessmen are winning, or people on the other side. And as someone who's run a business, I would be furious if I'd made investments and planned months or years in advance, and then you change the prices on me. Or I talked to a farmer yesterday who spent years building up a relationship, and now that relationship is gone, and he's like, I'm not sure we're ever going to get it back. And it took me 6 years to build that relationship. I would be furious. And so I am not the type that would change the rules on people that had been trying to make their farms or businesses more successful or internationally competitive. And if I were to try and do something like a tariff, I would literally give people like 3 years notice so that you don't have the rug pulled out from under you and that everyone can make adequate plans. But that would not be something I would be for in most any circumstance, because there are other ways, in my opinion, to address the imbalances. I will say that many Americans have problems with our current trade relationships because they feel like we're getting a raw deal. And in some cases we are. And that the goal has to be that to the extent that America's winning from trade, that Americans actually feel like we're participating in those winnings. And it's not just that a few companies are getting rich while Americans are losing on the other end.
Hello, thank you for taking our questions. Do you think it's beneficial to give the dividend, the freedom dividend, to people over a certain income, such as millionaires and billionaires, since they're not gonna spend that money?
Well, so this is the fun part. Let's use Jeff Bezos as an example, because he's literally one of the richest Americans. He's worth 160 billion. I think it's down to 80 billion. So that's a divorce joke. It's still a lot of money. So we're going to extract billions of dollars from Jeff because he's the biggest shareholder of this $1 trillion tech company that we're then going to be extracting, tens, hundreds of billions. We're going to be getting billions of dollars from Jeff. So then if we send him $1,000 a month just to remind him he's an American, like, it's fine. You know what I mean? Like the, not, but there are real values to universalizing it. And Alaska proves this. So number one is you destigmatize it. It's not like some people get it and other people don't. Number two, it's not seen as a rich to poor transfer. It's not like I'm giving it to you, you're getting it from me. Number three, you get rid of any incentives to somehow underreport your income or to have to monitor people. You just don't care. You're like, you're an American, you're a citizen, here's $1,000. And this is why it's so universally popular in Alaska, because they're not means testing it there. They're just like, you're an Alaskan, here's your $2,000. And that's one reason why it's been so successful and it stood the test of time for almost 40 years through many, many different administrations, is that if someone else is getting it, then it's easier to attack it. But if we're all getting it, it's very, very hard to attack. Oh, sure thing.
Hi, Mr. Yang. So I'm a current student at Roosevelt High School just down the street. Go Rough Riders. I was engaged in several walkouts last year, and many were even to the Capitol protesting gun violence within schools, which gained attention of not only the state legislature, but also nationwide across the country. And I think that is a very important issue. Something that I am struggling with is that I am currently 16 and cannot vote in 2020 because I am 25 days off the deadline. Yeah. Now, you support having 16-year-olds vote, and I was wondering, because I count for 0 Californians, how can you make it, or how would you get the support from other Democrats, Republicans within Congress, or even other people fighting for the nomination to allow or to be in favor of 16-year-olds voting?
Thanks, it's a great question. I recently came out in favor of having the voting age go from 18 to 16. And there were a number of reasons. I actually got some controversy and pushback around that. But I'm convinced it's the right move, in part because imagine what it would do to our high schools, political culture. If the juniors and seniors in high school could actually vote, then it goes from being something that's somewhat not personal or relevant to all of a sudden it's like, who are you going to vote for? And the studies have shown that the earlier someone votes, the more likely they are to become a lifetime voter. So lowering the voting age would be transformative. Now, some of the pushback I've gotten was like, well, 16-year-olds don't know anything about politics. And what I responded to that is like, it's not like we're giving people a pop quiz when they show up at the ballot box. You know, there are probably people making votes right now that are not exactly reading Politico every day or something. I think Politico's in the room. Sorry, Politico. So to the question of how we can get people on board with that, a friend of mine actually proposed it in Congress and got about 100 supporters in Congress, which is not enough to pass it. But I'm convinced that if we keep pushing, that we can convince Americans that it's the right move. And to me, it's a moral issue because, frankly, you're going to be here longer than I will. And so if you're going to be here longer, you should have a say in what's going on in our country. And it shouldn't be that you feel like your voice doesn't count at the stage you're at. And to the issue you are passionate around gun control, I couldn't agree more. Where, to me as a parent, it's crazy to me that students are coming to schools and are actually concerned about being caught in a shooting and having drills to protect themselves. And so I'm for common sense gun legislation to try and make it harder for Americans to get access to deadly firearms. But I'm also for a massive mental health initiative, which is very much tied together. My brother is a clinical psychologist, and I know that there is so much more we can do. And so investing in mental health is one way that we can help address the violence. And one thing I've already committed to is I'm going to have a psychologist in the White House. I thought that was a good idea even before this administration. But we can destigmatize the mental health issues that, frankly, we all struggle with. And there is a mental health crisis in this country among young people in particular, really among all Americans, because if you look at the rates of anxiety and depression and the stress levels, like we are more stressed out than just about any other advanced country at this point. It's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about the fact that we need to humanize our economy as fast as possible and get you the right to vote, man.
All right, I believe we have time for one last question, so I'll pass it here.
Hey, I'm Nick. I actually came up from Kansas City as well to come see this. So,
I love you guys. I did not mean to. I mean, anyone who drove a long distance to be here, like, you know, you guys are awesome.
So in my case, I've been working in call centers for the past decade, more because entry-level, decent pay, and really couldn't get anything else. My main question is actually more tied to the Medicare for All issue, though, since part of what I was working for was the Medicare and health insurance marketplace call centers. I've had numerous, just countless calls from people who, okay, even with basic Medicare as is, you still have the issue of it covers 80%, but then the remaining 20% you're stuck with. So even taking a past bill that I've had to deal with, the base price on it was $138,000. Even with the base 80% covered, I'd still be looking at about 25 grand, and I'd still be paying that off. And okay, you could get another plan to cover the remaining 20%, but that's still another $500+ a month usually. So even taking into account that and the list of exclusions a lot of plans will have, what's your plan for trying to make it so that even going for Medicare for All, making it so that the bill still doesn't pretty much financially ruin someone if they get caught in that kind of accident or some kind of situation like cancer or anything else that's going to just leave them hospitalized for who knows how long?
Thank you. It's a great question. My parents retired to another country a number of years ago. They bounced back and forth because I have I have kids, so they want to visit their grandkids, so they hear a lot too. But when they went into the hospital in Asia, they were blown away by how fast and easy and inexpensive it was. They were literally just like, what? Like, is that it? And then they just gave them like a $50 like copay for like significant procedures too. And then they came back to this country and they're like, what is going on with the American healthcare system? We've essentially been shell-shocked by our own system for so long, where if you say something like it cost $58,000 to do something, like we all know those horror stories all too well. There are a lot of costs that are baked into our system that are not real. And you know this because a lot of the hospital pricing, it's all over the map. Like the same thing can cost something totally different in one county versus another. It can cost something totally different from one patient to another in the same hospital. There's a lot of fabrication going on and a lot of sticker shock. And when you dig in, you find that the true costs of a lot of this stuff are much lower than we're paying. And there's no clearer example of that than prescription drugs. Where if you look at the prescription drugs, again, the prices are like completely arbitrary and all over the map. So one of the things I proposed, which, like, one, Medicare has to be able to negotiate drug prices. That would bring the cost down for Americans very, very quickly. Two, we should say to all the drug companies, we need to be paying no more than the average of what you're charging other countries, because they're in the habit of gouging us relative to other countries, because the other countries are too smart to pay extortionate rates, but we're not smart enough. So they're like, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna like charge everyone else like stuff where we can make money normal rate, and then Americans is up here. So there are ways we can get the cost down. I'm confident of it in large part because other countries have done at least some versions of it, and I've looked at the numbers. I have a friend who's an investor in that space, and she tells me that she has never seen profiteering at this scale in her entire career. She's like, looks at some of the drug companies and the device companies and the service providers and is like, their numbers make no sense. And she said that they make so little sense that she's now shorting those companies or betting against them. And then she supported my campaign for president so I can clean it up. And that's what I'm gonna do. There's like zero lobbyist money in this campaign. It's all $19 donations from people like you. I'm my own man. I'm going to do what's right for the American people. And if that means like trying to rip out some of these costs in the healthcare system, that would give me delight.
Yeah, if folks want to start lining up over here for pictures, do we want to have them
Thank
come
you,
up?
Iowa. The selfie pledge. Let's do it. I will see you very soon. Looking forward to meeting you all. Thank you so much.